Hey everybody, welcome. I'm excited to go into this lesson with you guys. This week we're going to be tackling how you can make sure that you maintain good mental health, particularly if you're dealing with an ongoing health issue, a physical issue, or some type of disease, chronic condition, something of that nature. So if you are dealing with something like that, or you have a family member or a friend who's having mental health issues in response to a health condition, this will be very valuable and useful for you. So if you guys don't know who I am or you're new to our community, welcome. We're glad to have you. My name is Hicks, founder of mentalhealthcoaching.com and the SSS conditioning method, where we use a mental brain retraining process to help people reduce anxiety or depression, typically by about 75% in about 90 days on average. And we put this content out there for you guys because we want you to have the skills you need to have the mental health you deserve. Because anybody deserves to live anxiety and depression free. You just got to know how to do it. And I'm going to make sure that I'm tackling that particular promise today in a little bit more detail, because I know a lot of people in our community are dealing with some type of additional complication medically. And I've been seeing this as an ongoing pattern for a number of our clients. And so I wanted to address this and put some material together on this. To make sure that I can speak with you guys directly. So I'm going to have a couple stories to share, some personal ones. I'm going to walk you through a couple examples that I've used to help guide clients through challenging situations like this. And then I've also got a number of different bullet points I want to cover with you to help you as well. So I think I'll start with just some generic content here for you on talking about this in general. So the first big thing I would say, if you're dealing with any type of ongoing issue, and I've encountered all sorts of different ones with clients, things like Crohn's disease, even some cancer diagnosis, heart disease, heart palpitations. Let's see, another one I dealt with, I remember, was a progressive neurological disorder a couple of my clients had last year. Where they essentially were told by their doctors that things were going to get progressively worse. And so those are particularly challenging. But anything that is causing an ongoing physical pain, any type of discomfort, anything that's creating some type of a challenge or a disability of some sort. I just actually spoke with a woman a few days ago, and if I remember correctly, she had gotten into a car accident, had some brain damage, and so her memory was not the same anymore, and her ability to kind of focus was no longer the same. So I'm really just talking about pretty much anything under the sun that would be an ongoing health-related challenge or issue. And so the first big bullet point that I'm going to share with you is not the most uplifting one, but it is important, and that is that at some point, somewhere, your health is going to decline, right? And I think that one of the big challenges that people run into mental health wise is they go through their life with this idealistic expectation that their health should never decline. And that is part of why people tend to spiral and have this ongoing anxiety or depression in relation to their physical problem. And I'll speak more on that a little bit later. But if you can, I am a big proponent that if you can at least adopt the mantra that eventually everything changes. Eventually everything changes. That will prepare you to be a lot more resilient later on in your life. Another good example of this would be economically. So most people don't know this, but every 10 years or so, there tends to be a recession. It has pretty much been categorized historically for centuries, right? It happens. Happened in 2009, happened again during COVID in 2020. I'm sure it will happen again somewhere between probably 2027 and 2033, somewhere along those lines. There will probably be another substantial recession. But people tend to lose their minds because as soon as the recession occurs, they go, oh my gosh, what is going on? The world is falling apart, because they're comparing the new recession era financial situation to the mental ideal that they have created in their mind about how things should be. And so I want to remind all of you, maybe this is the first time you're hearing me explain this, but there is something that we call the formula for peace of mind, or the formula for fulfillment. And that is when our life conditions match our expectations, we experience peace of mind. If you ever are experiencing anxiety or depression, it's because there is a mismatch between how your life is and the expectations, the rules, the shoulds that you are holding on to about how your life should be. And so, whether it's a financial downturn, or whether it is a change in your physical health, or whether it is your child not talking to you the way that you believe they should be, etc. Whenever we have a departure where life is no longer matching up with how we expect life to be, we can get, at the very low end, stressed; on the very high end, depressed or suicidal even. And so what I've seen happen for some people is they have a physical condition pop up, and they're then comparing their current situation now with this physical condition to the original vision of their future that they had. And they're comparing their current situation to that ideal, and they're kind of unwilling, or they're untrained in how to be flexible and create a new vision of the future. They're unwilling to adopt and incorporate the elements that are outside of their control as a new part of their narrative going forward in their life. And so this constant obsession with not accepting the things that are outside of your control can be a big problem mental health wise. And that's a key thing we'll touch on a little bit later, and I'll share some stories about that. So everything changes. Your health will eventually decline. There's plenty you can do in your control to prolong health issues from taking place and mitigate them from lasting very long when they do pop up. But of course, it catches up with us eventually everywhere. Eventually, all of us are going to have a health problem. So if you can just accept that that's going to take place, some of us sooner rather than later, I think it will enable you to meet those challenges with a lot more flexibility. Okay, so the metaphor that I use and teach people a lot is, we call this the curveball analogy. So if you were driving your car towards a particular destination, right, you have a mental vision of what that destination is that you're going to be reaching. And then let's say all of a sudden you hit a patch of ice on the road and your car starts to spin. Well, if your car starts to spin, it's obviously going to go in the direction of a hazard, maybe a tree, for example. And as you're going in the direction that you didn't plan on going in, it's going to be very tempting for your mind to want to stare at the tree that you are afraid that you are going to hit. Right? So when we have a curveball situation occur in our life, it's when we are going along, we have a particular vision of how things are going to be and what destination we are going to reach eventually. Then we hit a patch of ice. The patch of ice, metaphorically, could be some type of health issue that you were not expecting and did not anticipate. And so now your car starts to spin. It feels very disorienting, and what's going to happen is your mind is going to want to default to focusing on the worst case scenario and what you fear. It's going to want to stare at the tree that you are afraid of hitting. The problem is when you stare at the tree, you're more likely to hit the tree. That is to say that when you focus on what you are afraid of taking place, you are more likely to manifest that occurring in your life. Right? And I see this happen with people all the time. 2/3 of my clients are dealing with anxiety of some kind, and anxiety is just the mental focusing on a vision of the future that you do not want to take place. And so when you continue to focus on, oh gosh, what if it gets worse, and what if my health declines further, and what if this problem happens, and what if we can't pay our bills, and on and on and on, the more we get stressed out, the more we take actions in accordance with being stressed out, the more likely we are to handle the issue in an ineffective way, right? And the more we handle it in an ineffective way, the more we get ourselves into a stressful situation, right? So on the flip side, what you want to do, the first most important thing that you want to do in a situation like this is you have to focus on the outcome that you want. Okay, now it needs to be an outcome that is actually grounded in reality, even if it's going to be challenging. So you don't want to focus on, oh, I just wish that this could all go away magically tomorrow morning as soon as I wake up. Because that's not realistic. That's not within your control. That's not going to happen. But for a lot of you, you're dealing with, say, like a progressive or a chronic issue. The outcome you could be focused on is, okay, you know what? Yes, I do have this progressive chronic issue, but what are the outcomes I care about in my life in general? What do I want to do on the weekends? How do I want to spend time with my grandkids? What do I want to do with my spouse or partner? What do I want to do with my career? What do I want to do in my life, right? What outcomes do I want, as opposed to what am I afraid my life might turn into? You see the difference? The people I have found who have the best mental state, in fact, I had this really interesting moment. I was speaking with a client of mine 2 days ago, and she was getting screened. She had a mass. She was getting screened, and so she doesn't know the results of it yet. But she told me that she encountered a woman at the hospital, and the woman at the hospital, she had some type of cancer. I can't remember what type now, but anyway, she had some type of significant cancer, and I believe it was metastatic, and it was going to be terminal, right? And so my client was at the hospital. My client was having like an anxiety attack, pretty much, about just having to go through the test, right? Having to get the scan, not even like what could the scan show, right? But just going through the scan. And so she's talking with this other woman who has now been confirmed diagnosed with a terminal illness. And the person that she was speaking to who had a terminal illness in the lobby was in very good spirits. Like, she was calm. She was like reading a magazine. She had a smile. She greeted my client with a smile and a warm notion. And, she was in good spirits. And so my client was talking to her like, how in the world are you so level-headed about this? And she didn't ask her that directly, right? But she was trying to figure it out as she talked to this woman. And what she realized is that the woman was focused on a couple key things. The first thing was the woman was focused more so on what she was still looking forward to, right? She was looking forward to still having memories with her children, having some good experiences later that year, right? And then her dominant focus was on caring and being sympathetic and compassionate for her family, as opposed to being focused on her own pain and her own fears. And that just kind of resonated as proof of this one key thing I always teach my clients, which is focus equals feeling. If you're feeling anxious or you're feeling depressed, it's not because you're just destined to feel anxious and depressed for the rest of your life. It's because your mind is selectively focusing on something. You're focusing on what you fear. You're focusing on your pain. You're not focusing on other people. You're not focusing on a vision of the future of what you really want, and that's why you're feeling upset. So the first big tip I would encourage everyone to do is make sure that if you're dealing with something like this, you keep your focus on the outcome you want, not what you fear. Okay, and a lot of people do this where they go, well, what I want is I don't want to be sick. No. That's focusing on what you don't want. See, because that'd be like me saying to you, don't think about a purple elephant. Right? Of course, it causes your mind to immediately think about the purple elephant. So when you get into your head and go, well, I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be sick anymore. I don't want to go through any more tests. I don't want to go through any more surgeries. I don't want to have any more pain. What that's really doing is it's causing your mind to focus on the tree. It's like looking at the tree and saying, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree. Right? You're making it focal in your mind. And so therefore it becomes something that predominates you in terms of your emotional state. So you got to instead go, okay, well, what is the outcome I do want? And this is what we did with my wife when she got a cancer diagnosis last year. As I wrote down on a sticky note like 4 different rules that we were going to abide by, a copy for her and a copy for me, because we were scared to death the first day, when she got the news. But I knew that we were going to have to take control of our mindset to get through this. And the very first rule that I wrote down was we're going to focus on the outcome we want, which is that you're going to get through the treatment plan and you're going to get through the other side into recovery, and we're going to get you healthy again. And so each physical condition is a little different. For some things, it may not be that you can focus on a vision of being totally disease-free, but you can still focus on a vision of how you want the future to go, right? You can take into account the things that are not within your control, but still focus on a vision of the future that is yours to craft and to influence. And that's where your power is, okay? So that's what happens when we hit a curveball. And the final thing I'll mention before we shift gears slightly is that when we get upset, it's because we get upset because we believe that our health shouldn't, quote, shouldn't be changing, right? So just remember, it's not the fact that you're sick that's making you feel mentally unhealthy. It's the fact that you believe that you shouldn't be sick that's making you feel depressed and or anxious. right? And so part of making sure that you have good mental health with a physical condition is some level of acceptance of the things that are outside of your control is key, okay? So now some practical tips, and then I'll share some stories with you. So practical tips on what to do. Number one, focus on the outcome you want, not what you fear. Number two, take action on what is in your control, right? So you think of it this way: you will, as a general rule, have worse and worse mental health the more you focus on what you cannot control. You will have better and better mental health the more you focus on things that are within your control, or at least things that you can influence, even if you can't control them. And that would be a very good mental exercise to do if you're dealing with a physical condition, is to separate everything that's been running through your head into 3 buckets. So bucket number 1 would be things that you can control. The second would be things that you cannot control, but things that you can influence. The third would be things that you cannot control and you cannot influence. So I'll just use my wife's situation for an example of this. So things that we could control. Well, what we could control is what we focus on. What we could control is how we spend our time. What we could control is a lot. What we choose to believe, what we choose to tell ourselves, what doctors we get, what treatment plan we take, what insurance we use, what we tell people in terms of our friends and family, what we don't tell people, right? All of those types of things. And those were things that we focused on. So we made it very clear with our friends and family that we didn't want to be called every single day, like being asked for an update, that we would give them updates via email maybe once a week, that we didn't want to have our whole life revolving around the cancer. We wanted, we knew cancer was going to be a part of our life. We just didn't want it to be the whole thing that sucked up our entire life. And so those were a couple key things in which we chose what we could control. We also took control of how we could spend our time. We made sure that we still had some fun things on the calendar, even though my wife's energy levels were definitely up and down during chemo and things of that nature. That was a big thing that we took advantage of, was, okay, what can we do to still make sure there are things to look forward to? Right, so that is where you want to spend 80% of your time, is on things that you can control. The second bucket were things that we cannot control, but things that we can influence. And this would include like how other people treat you, right? How other people communicate with you about the disease, how other people act around you. Another thing you could influence would be how you're going to navigate your work situation. So you might not be able to totally control how your boss responds to you getting sick or something of that nature, but you can influence that, right? You can have a desired outcome in mind, and then you can go forward and take action in that particular way. Another example might be, say, depending on your disease, your energy levels, right? There might be some, like for example, like Lyme disease, right, is going to impact your energy levels. You're going to have chronic fatigue, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing within your power and control that you can do to adjust your energy levels, right? There certainly are. Let's say if you have osteoporosis, for example, it's not like there is nothing that you can do in order to maintain your bone density and your bone health, right? There are things that you can do. So you can take control of your diet, you can take control of your exercise routine, you can take control of your lifestyle choices, where you choose to live, how you choose to spend your time, how much fresh air you get, how active you are, who you spend your time with. And what I see ends up happening a lot of times for people is they spend the majority of their focus and attention on what they fear and what they cannot control. And that's the absolute worst way to go about having an ongoing physical issue. You want to focus on the outcome you do want, and focus on what you can control and what you can influence to make it how you want it. And in that way, you won't feel victimized by the situation, because your mind will constantly be on the lookout for, how can I make it better? How can I improve it? How can I still make my life enjoyable? Okay, those are a couple key things. Tip number 3 is focus the second highest portion of your energy on what you can influence. Which I just said, okay? Number 4, learn to accept only what you cannot control or influence. Okay, so I want to make sure that I clarify this point. What I'm not advocating for, when I say acceptance, what I'm not advocating for is defeatism, right? So let's say you are diagnosed as pre-diabetic or diabetic, for example, right? Maybe you had a history of obesity. You maybe had a family history and you were told that you're diabetic and you might be at risk for some other heart complications. Okay, well, I'm not saying to just go, okay, well, that's it. I'm diabetic, so that is what it is. I guess I'll just live as long as I can with my diabetes and we'll see how long that takes. I'm not advocating for that at all. I'm saying you should have an outcome in mind that you really want. Like, okay, if you're pre-diabetic, then let's prevent the diabetes, right? If you do have diabetes, okay, well, I have diabetes, but how can I manage it, mitigate it, make sure that it doesn't get worse, right? Things of that nature. And have that outcome in mind, and then take advantage of what you can control and what you can influence. In that case, that'd be a great deal. Like, your physical weight is something that you can largely control, right? You can influence it heavily, right? And so you certainly can make sure that you get yourself to lose weight. You might need a slightly different plan than the average person. Maybe you have a thyroid issue or something of that nature, so you need a more customized plan. But you certainly can influence that tremendously, and to a large degree, I would say you can control it. So that would be a couple key things. But if you made a series of bad decisions in the past, like say your diet was poor, or maybe you drank too much and now you have cirrhosis of the liver, and that's just what it is. You've got cirrhosis, you can't change that, you can only mitigate it from getting worse. There's no sense in you spending additional time beating yourself up for the past, right? So that's what I mean by accept only what you cannot control or influence, which would include the past, right? So that would be one key thing, is make sure that if you've done anything at all to influence your health journey up until now, don't beat yourself up about the past. That's going to be a total waste of energy. And then also, if you have a disease or an issue that is beyond your control or influence, or maybe you already are doing everything you can conceivably do to control or influence it, but you still are going to have to deal with some level of chronic pain or discomfort or some type of a disability, then yes, you do have to learn to accept that and make peace with the fact that that is what it is. Your choices are either do that or perpetually feel anxious and depressed about the fact that there's something in your life that you dislike. Those are unfortunately just your only options. Okay, and then the fifth and most important thing, and this is really the key thing I think for anybody, is make your life revolve around something other than being sick. So one big problem, and this goes, by the way, just for mental health issues, but also physical health issues, because I see people do this all the time, where they start to develop a little bit of anxiety, so they start to feel a little more triggered or sensitive at work, so they feel an impulse to want to stay home. And so then what they might do is they might actually quit work and seek disability insurance, and now they're at home. And it would seem that that's the totally normal, good thing to do, right? And in the short term, it does create a good thing. It does create relief and comfort and all of that. But I cannot even begin to tell you guys the thousands and thousands of people I've seen over the years where their mental health actually steadily got worse as they got off of work, and they spent less and less time spending their energy on helping other people, contributing to other people, building something, growing, working towards a goal. And now more and more of the percentage of their available time just revolved around focusing on how sick they were or how bad they felt. Problems need energy to grow. This is one key thing I have learned over the years, time and time again. And the more we continuously focus on what we dislike about our current health situation and or mental health, and what we fear taking place in the future, the worse our mental health gets. So yes, you need to get your life revolving around something that causes your energy to go outside of yourself. You either need to go volunteer, you need to go work, you need to do something with your time and energy to make sure that you are moving forward towards some compelling vision of the future. You cannot just revolve your whole life and all of your energy and all of your focus around being sick. Because what ends up happening is you start to make being sick a part of your identity of who you are. And then when you feel identified with it, it feels essentially impossible to actually feel any good mental health, right? Because now you've made a situation where you feel that who you are in your physical disease is inseparable. And they are separable. It is good to think about them as separate things. A good example would be like if you are walking in the rain, you feel the rain, right? You feel the rain all around you, but the rain is not you. The rain is something you experience. The rain is something you have to go through, but the rain is not you. And it's the same thing with your physical condition or your mental health issues, right? Yes, anxiety might be something you experience. Yes, depression might be something you experience. Yes, you might have chronic pain. Maybe you have a progressive disease or challenge, but it's not you. The disease is not equivalent with who you are. It might be a part of your life, but you don't want to revolve your whole identity around being sick, because when you do that, mental health declines tremendously. We need to feel that we are revolving our life around either A, growth towards some type of goal, even if it's just a simple hobby or a sport or anything. We got to feel like we're growing. Number 2 would be contribution. We have to spend our energy and our focus on helping other people. That's what makes us feel fulfilled. The more you focus on your own pain and your own problems and your own fears, the worse your mental health will get. Okay, and it's totally understandable why your focus would go in that direction. It's just that it will always lead to bad outcomes from a mental health standpoint. Okay, so I'll share with you just a couple quick stories. With my wife, we came up with this list of 4 rules. Number 1, as I mentioned, was we're going to focus on the outcome we want, the fact that we're going to beat this thing. That was number 1. The number 2 rule she came up with, which is we were going to have fun, right? And that was really good because it meant that we had to put a value towards the top of our list of not just trying to revolve our whole life around being healthy, but to make sure that we also were still going to incorporate having fun into our life, which was a really important thing. The third one we wrote down was we're going to focus on what we can control. And then the fourth one, I can't quite remember. Let me see if I can find the sticky note here. Give me one second, because I'm pretty sure I have those. Oh, here it is. So number 1 was actually have fun. Number 2, focus on the fact that we're beating this. Number 3, do the necessary things to be healthy and grow through them. And then number 4, take one thing at a time and focus on what we can control. That take one thing at a time thing is really important, because sometimes, depending on the disease, they're going to lay out like a big treatment plan. And that's what happened for her, is like she had a 12-month plan of like 3 surgeries and 2 different forms of like chemo and immunotherapy and all sorts of different stuff. And so it would be easy for us to think about the whole year and get overwhelmed by it, right? And so what we learned to do is we just got to focus day by day, week by week, and make the gains that we can make. And that was kind of the important thing for us to do. So that helped a lot. Now, we also had a second complication with hers. This was about 2 months ago. She had a side effect to her immunotherapy, almost went blind. So we had this situation where she was across the country on a business trip, and her vision had been getting sort of blurry for about a week, but we just thought it was maybe a vision change or something of that nature. But then all of a sudden her vision started getting really badly, really quickly, and not just blurry, but like it was getting dark. And so we realized, okay, this is obviously a bad situation. So she woke up one morning, like the second day of her business trip, and she could barely see. She could barely read her text messages. And so we knew, okay, we got to get you on a plane. We got to get you back home. We got to get you to the hospital. So she got on the plane, and she couldn't even, by the time she got to the airport, she couldn't even see what the number was on the gate. So she had to like tap a stranger's shoulder to like confirm she was at the right gate. She had to get a flight attendant's help to get to the right seat. It was a problem. And then I was right there when she got off the plane, caught her off the plane, rushed her to the hospital. We were in the ER all night. We were then in the hospital for a week, and her vision got so bad, like at its worst, she was essentially completely blind. She only had one tiny sliver of vision left. And so we didn't know what was happening. The doctors had pretty much no answers for us. Come to find out, she had a really rare condition in response to her immunotherapy. They couldn't tell us if her vision was ever going to come back, if she was going to go totally blind. We had no idea. And it was like that for about a week. And we were there in the hospital, and ironically, we actually, that week in the hospital was not that bad from an emotional standpoint, which may sound kind of crazy, but the big reason is because we were taking control of what we focused on, right? We were not allowing ourselves to focus on what we feared taking place. We were not allowing ourselves to focus on the unknowns and things that we can't control. We were just focusing day by day, and we were also focusing on what we could appreciate about the experience. So, we were just like making jokes with the nurses, and we were like appreciating that we were in a good hospital and all those types of things. And so it took about 2 months for her vision to come back, and we weren't sure if it ever would come back. And that was a big challenge. So it just kind of goes to show, I think, that when really severe, crazy curveballs come in, you can still have good mental health during those situations. You just have to take control of what you are focusing on and what you make things mean and all of that good stuff. So that's another key thing. I'll tell you maybe one or two other stories. One client I had, she had a response to her anti-anxiety medications called serotonin syndrome, where it really had some very severe side effects. And some of you may have experienced this or you've heard of this, but it was essentially she just had been on anti-anxiety medication for too long. And so everything kind of from a health standpoint kind of got flipped upside down. And so we knew that for her, the side effects were still going to be a part of her life for a good long period of time. So what we did, though, is instead of her just sitting at home all day focusing on how sick she was, we created a plan for her to feel like she was growing and for her to feel like she was contributing. So I gave her this assignment of coming up with 30 different things she could do to help other people. And even just small things like paying for somebody's Starbucks in the line behind her, going and giving a homeless person $5, things of that nature. And so she came up with a list, and I said, great, what you're going to go do is you're going to do one of these things for the next 30 days and pick a new one each day. And so she went and committed to that, and by the end of the 30 days, her mental health had completely soared. She said it was like the best month she'd ever had in her life because she was building her self-esteem up. She was feeling this like true sense of joy because she was truthfully revolving her life around giving and contributing and growing and all of these really cool things. And so that was a really powerful situation. Another client I had, she had developed what's called TD, which is a very severe progressive disorder where literally you lose your mobility over time. Also one that happens after being on medication for too long. And so she knew things were going to progressively get worse, but she had two small kids. And so, before she was focused on, what if I become immobile and, maybe my kids would be better off without me and all of that type of thing. And so instead we created a vision of how she could make sure that she was still going to have a great relationship with her kids, make sure her kids had a great ongoing childhood, right? An ongoing experience in their childhood and all of the memories that she was going to create with them. And that became her big driving force. That became her new North Star, if you will, for her life. And that's what enabled her to have really, really good mental health, even though she had a progressive neurological challenge, right? As she learned to train her focus to be elsewhere. So it is a little challenging, when your body is sending you these constant signals of pain or discomfort. So I'm not saying it's just a walk in the park, but I am saying that your choices are to either curse the fact that you got sick and for the rest of your life, essentially just, put up the middle finger to the fact that you got sick in the first place and try to argue with reality, but reality is going to win. Right? The other alternative is you can learn how to train and condition the brain so that you can actually have good mental health no matter what comes your way. And that's what's really important. So if you are going through a situation like this, my heart goes out to you, but it's important for you to take power into your own hands and learn the skills necessary to make sure you have good mental health long term. Okay? And if you need a support system behind you, of course, we're always here for you. But I hope this has been helpful. I'd love to see the comments. I think that there's going to be a lot of good community support on this particular post. Like some of you guys may have learned some tips about how to mitigate your own challenges. So anything that you want to share would certainly help other people in the community, I'm sure. But thanks again for listening and tuning in, and I'll be excited to serve you guys in the next lesson. Okay, take care for now. Bye.